All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back. We are. Oh, I said something went wrong on my video. That's funny. Um, we are covering Deflate again. I know you guys are excited as we continue through Deflate. Uh, Today we have on my wonderful host and co-host Peter. Hello. Welcome, welcome. And right now, so far, it is just the two of us. So yeah, well, maybe Nestlig will show up, or Dapper, or somebody. We don't know, but as of right now, it's just us. So, uh, yeah, yep, yep, exactly. All right. So, we are continuing talking about Deflate and his bad arguments about the. Well, see, we finished his bad arguments about the Cambrian. Now we're moving on to his video about punctuated equilibrium, where he's just gonna lie. Oh, Peter, they said they can't hear you.
Wrong microphone. Wrong microphone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you,
Yeah.
chat.
So yeah, see, I'm a great producer. I do everything right except the
I see.
things that I need to do for myself.
Dalton, you're in the chat. Do you want to come join us? You want to come get in here, Dalton? Yeah, it happens. Happens to everybody. Yeah, let's see. Last week we had Aaron on. That was fun. He
That
got
was
to
fun.
talk with us about Deflate. And we had a good time with that. That was pretty fun.
The good thing is we had Arn on, and we ended up covering less than 4 minutes of a video in 2 hours. So
yeah,
considering what we're watching, I think that's a good thing.
yeah,
But
it's yeah, it gets to the point with like Deflate and these other creationists where they'll start with like a lie or just I guess a wrong thing every few sentences, and then it like gets progressively more wrong the further you go.
yeah.
Suddenly it's just um all right, understandable, Dalton. Um, you know, suddenly it's like every other word is wrong. It's like no, that's not what that is. No, stop talking.
So what I noticed is something that I should be used to, because the reason that I'm here in the first place is because I bumped into a Kenthoven video, which is literally why I went on social media. But this guy's doing the exact same thing. So he makes a video and then he makes another video with a completely different title and talks about exactly the same things. It with the same pictures and the same PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah.
When do these guys actually make videos on topic? I mean, that would help. If you're doing a show that's entitled "So Let's Mess with Darwin," then don't go back to a video that you did about the Cambrian explosion and got wrong already.
Yeah. Very true.
I don't get it. But yeah, so I checked, and so this was the screen that we ended on.
Yes, that looks right.
And I would have gone to a pause right after that, but this guy is the champ of the silly pauses. And so I didn't want to do that right off the start. I mean, that would just be cheap shot, I think. So
we gotta wait a little bit to catch him in a funny pose.
Yeah.
You don't get that from the beginning. You have to wait for it.
We need to give him a chance.
Tease it out.
We need to give him a chance.
Yeah.
And Icarus, you're right. If you have Arn on, just let him talk for an hour. No need for a video. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So with this one, Deflate began by saying basically that punctuated equilibrium was invented to save Darwinism, the
Mm-hmm.
the theory that no one had been using for like 50 plus years by that point. But no matter, because Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, the modern synthesis of evolution, they're all the same. It's all the exact same thing. Evolution, science as a whole doesn't actually progress. It's all the same stuff from 200 years ago. Let's
And
be real.
what annoys me most is that if science or scientists, you should actually say scientists, if they make a
Mm.
discovery, these people call it an invention.
Yeah.
As if as if as if they pull it out of their ass and okay, this I've invented this. This'll help. And
Yeah.
why do you need to be this dishonest? They discovered a couple of things and then came up with an explanation for the things that they
Right.
discovered, gave it a name, and that's what you're looking at.
Right.
It's
Right. Exactly.
no
Yeah.
one in science is inventing things.
Right. The well, the theory of punctuated equilibrium was was devised to explain a series of phenomena that Gould and Eldridge, who are both paleontologists, sort of realized about the fossil record, and it is that when you have these more fine scale pictures, which we are increasingly getting as the fossil record gets more and more, as we discover more and more fossils, as more and more of it gets uncovered,
Mm-hmm.
um, that it looks less like phyletic gradualism for everything as Darwin thought, 100 years earlier. It's not so much phyletic gradualism where everything is slowly, constantly, adapting in different directions. And while that does happen, you can have that on the one hand, but also you can have periods of rapid evolution, then stasis, then rapid evolution, then stasis. These two things, phyletic gradualism on the one end and punctuated equilibrium on the other, are ends of a continuum. It's a spectrum. You can have this whole range between them because the rate of evolution, as we've known since, I mean, even Darwin himself was like, yeah, some organisms take very long times to adapt, some don't, but it has been known for a long time that the rates of evolution vary. And then you have, so Darwin kind of mentioned that, but then you had in the 1940s, um, uh, um, oh, what was his name? Simpson. You had Simpson, who was like, who formalized the idea of different rates of evolution. And then Gould and Eldridge came along and talked about that for the fossil record. And then for molecular genetics, you have Kimura and these other guys who also pointed out that you take neutral sequences of your DNA and you can determine how fast these neutral regions accrue mutations, and that's what generates the molecular clocks. So you can compare these regions between different species, and you can see, how long would it have taken for this species to develop this many mutations in this neutral region, and given that, here's this fossil, which is the common ancestor. So how long did it take to do this, and when did their common ancestor live, and all this sort of stuff. And so that's all like differing rates of evolution, because we've known for a long time all this, or different, that evolution varies, right? We've known that for a long
Mm-hmm.
time. So Gould and Eldridge coming up with this idea and applying it to the fossil record is not by any means just like out of nowhere. Just it just rocked the foundation of science. Now, in fairness, it did cause a stir among some biologists and paleontologists. Richard Dawkins was a big, like, sort of neo-Darwinism, like old guard kind of guy, and so he and Gould got into fights over this stuff back in the 70s and 80s. In fact, if you read The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins, he even has a chapter in it that's titled "Punctuing Punctuationism" or "Puncturing Punctuationism," which is he's like attacking uh, uh, punctuated equilibrium, punkic, punkic. So yeah, you had fights like that. Philip Gingrich was another guy who was in there on Dawkins' side fighting against it, and he wrote some very interesting papers against punctuated equilibrium. For example, he wrote this one. where he looked at the fossil record of these like Cenozoic mammals, and he found that if when you have really fine gradations in these certain for certain organisms or in certain formations, and you can see on a really fine scale how they change over time, it does look gradualistic, and that's true. It does, because the idea of morphological stasis, and I'm sure we'll come back to this, is kind of arbitrary. When you say morphological stasis, what do you mean? What are we considering as stasis? Is it like the length of some feature? Is it how similar it looks to other members in this one group? How do you quantify that? And for some things, it's just kind of a sort of a, well, it hasn't, it looks like it hasn't changed that much in a long time. So that's stasis. Like people say that about the coelacanths, and it's like, well, actually, coelacanths have changed quite a bit. The species we have alive right now, the genus itself, Latimeria, is not in the fossil record. Like we don't have any fossils of Latimeria, so it doesn't extend past the KPG boundary at the very least. So, alrighty, well, preamble aside, let's let's see what Deflate's gonna throw at us.
It'd be good. Let's see.
Yep, I'm sure.
Outside of those periods of rapid change, evolution stands still. Thus, according to the theory, stable periods without change are punctuated by periods of rapid change, hence its name, punctuated equilibrium. Boldly defying the scientific status quo, Gould, in a famous article, claimed that neo-Darwinism was effectively dead, despite its persistence as textbook orthodoxy, as he marched on to advance what he called a new and general theory of evolution.
Pause. Okay, so that's actually perfect timing. So yeah, let's talk about that for a moment. So neo-Darwinism. So neo-Darwinism was coined in the 1930s. Gould and Eldridge are publishing their work in the late 1970s. Okay, or mid 1970s, something like that. So first of all, we're talking about a difference of like 40 years at least, so 40, 45 years, somewhere around in there. Yeah, science moves on, and it can move quite rapidly. So the neo-Darwinian synthesis, actually, well, let's take sort of a broader picture of this. When evolution was first sort of penned by, Chucky D himself, the very first iteration of it is what we call Darwinism, and that is the historical actual use, the correct usage of the term Darwinism is just what Darwin himself came up with back in the 1850s and 60s. Well, I mean, 1850s to the end of his life, basically. So you have natural and sexual selection, and that's kind of it. You have those mechanisms. Darwin had no idea how changes occurred, how variations were accrued. He didn't really know a lot about like embryology, all that sort of stuff. Those were totally unknown. Those were way later. So that's an interesting question. I'll answer that one sec. Let me finish with this bit, and then I'll answer that. So that's Darwinism. Now in the in the 1860s, I believe you also had Mendel, and so Gregor Mendel was a monk working on genetics. He was working on sort of the foundation of genetics, which he was performing these statistical tests with pea plants, Pisum sativum. And so what he found was that the traits followed statistical patterns, and he referred to them as dominant and recessive, right? So some traits are more likely to appear than others, and that depends on how many versions of the variant the parents pass on to their offspring. And now we know exactly how alleles work and all that sort of stuff. So we know how that works on a molecular level. He, of course, didn't know that because he's just crossing pea plants in his little monastery. So then early 1800s, early 1900s, early 1900s, 19 teens, you have guys like Thomas Hunt Morgan and his lab and other researchers who you had the rediscovery of Mendel around the turn of the 20th century by like Hugo de Vries and several other guys who all kind of rediscover Mendel. So these guys discover Mendel. Thomas Hunt Morgan does these experiments with fruit flies where they figure out like how mutations happen, how they affect the whole body. They figured out like linkage maps, recombination. Morgan did like the foundation of all that sort of stuff. Him and his colleagues. So then, by the time you get to the 1920s and into and very start of the 1930s, you have these statisticians, right? You have these mathematically inclined guys like Ronald Fisher, Sewell Wright, JBS Haldane. These guys who do lots and lots of statistics, and they're biologists too, but math is their big thing. So they take the ideas of Darwin, like natural and sexual selection, and they take Mendel's work with the statistics of how you have genetic variations. They took Thomas Hunt Morgan's work. They took all of this together and combined it into one thing, and they basically, that was population genetics. And so the founding of like the field of population genetics was basically how neo-Darwinism started in the 1930s. And you can read like Ronald Fisher's book, The Genetical Theory of Natural Selection, and he puts forward all these different formulas of how to understand, like, this is how variations happen, and then when they happen under this set of selective pressures, they can go to fixation in a population, blah blah blah, all that fun stuff. So they did that in the 1930s. Okay. 40 years later, a few things changed, such as, as we got better and better technology and we uncovered more and more fossil strata, the view of the fossil record changed. Darwin had almost nothing in terms of fossils. It took quite a while for more and more fossils to be accrued. And even in Gould's day, or well, back in the 70s, we didn't have all the fossils we have now. We have insanely more fossils now than we did back then. But to Gould and Eldridge, it seemed that the fossil record was more dominated by stasis and rapid periods of evolution, as opposed to the strict gradualism that Darwin expected. So Darwin's prediction was things are always very slowly changing, whereas for Gould it was like change, there's stasis, then very short change, then stasis, then very short change, and blah blah blah, over and over again. And so that sort of ruffled some feathers, like the ones I mentioned. But now punctuated equilibrium is orthodoxy at this point. It would be ludicrous to try to say it doesn't happen. It does. It absolutely does happen. There are even some really interesting experiments where you can kind of see punctuated equilibrium happening. Like we had a guy on not too long ago, William Ratcliffe, who does work with yeast. And they did an experiment where they evolved this originally unicellular yeast. They evolved it to be multicellular, and then they evolved it to actually be visible to the naked eye. And when they did that, they found that it underwent these periods of like rapid change, then stasis, then rapid change, then stasis. And so it's kind of like punctuated equilibrium, on a molecular level. So, it's kind of ridiculous. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did want to add something that you said at the very, very start of
okay,
what you just said, is that creationists are surprised that that there are more things coming in over time. I had an extremely lot of fun with a tweet that you retweeted from ICR this week. And so in the tweet, it said, "New science confirms." So I thought, well, let's see.
Oh, the one from like 2 years ago?
Yes. It was an article on their own website from 2 years ago. And on January this year, they tweeted it. It was from March 2021.
Okay.
New science that refuted that humans evolved from apes. I think that was it, right?
Okay. Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't
so
remember
my question immediately was, if these new findings from almost 2 years ago haven't hit the news anywhere yet, because I hadn't heard of it. I mean,
oh no, I do remember. It was the epigenetics thing where they were like, epigenetics refutes Darwin or something like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was it. No, I'm mixing up another tweet. But so that would have been world news.
Yeah.
That would have been on the news in every single country. And I get
Right.
not only Dutch, I get Belgium, German, and English TV here. Nothing.
Yeah.
I get American TV also, if you count in the highly scientific, what is it, National Geographic channel and Discovery Channel. So, but they would have mentioned it at least. I didn't get any reply with why it never hit the news and why they weren't up for the Nobel Prize in science for 2021 and 2022. Because why not?
You know, Peter, it's funny. It's funny you mentioned the Nobel Prize thing. Well, I'll do the other thing first. Well, yeah, for one thing, that the article that they were actually referencing, for one, yeah, no, has nothing to do with refuting evolution at all. It was like epigenetics can facilitate adaptation to high altitudes. Like, okay, cool. Didn't know that, but
That was it. That was it.
That's
And
a thing, I guess. All right, you know. But
I got into
the thing about
I have to go and check that because
Okay.
of that tweet, I got into a chat with someone from Scotland,
okay.
Dr. Fiona Robertson, who I still
Oh
consider.
yeah, I know who she is.
Yeah, I consider her a friend, especially after the, and we won't mention it. She went through a lot of stuff, but she actually did some research into that, and now
Okay.
okay. She replied, interestingly, early in the pandemic, a lot of people with the basic knowledge of HAPE and HACE suggested that this is great for me. Dexamethasone may be useful
Okay.
in critically ill patients because what was happening to them was so similar to the symptoms of anoxia in high altitude casualties.
Ah.
Dexamethasone saves lives on mountains. Now it routinely saves lives in critically ill COVID patients, and that is because
Okay.
the really serious symptoms are down to an overwhelming immune response, which the Dex tamps down on like any steroid. So she did some research into that, which,
Okay.
as you can see, then you can get to a decent conversation even from a tweet that involves ICR. I didn't know that, so but yeah, apparently that's another thing she's done.
Yeah. Oh.
And for people, and I did ask what are HAPE and HACE, high altitude pulmonary edema and high altitude cerebral edema.
Not
So,
fun stuff.
no, but I didn't know that.
Um.
So that was fun to
Well,
have
Peter,
someone.
you know how creationists have long said if evolution were true, then they would win the Nobel Prize for it. You know, creationists have said that for a long time.
Yes.
Well, it turns out a biologist has won the Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine for his work on evolution,
Oh.
and
So-
specifically human evolution.
Oh.
His name
I'm.
is. I'll put it here in the side chat. Svant.
I am
Bravo.
so sorry for Kent Hovind because that means that not only evolution is science, but the evolution of humans is science.
Yep. His work
Oh.
is on paleogenomic, which also, and this is also hilarious, because Nathaniel, you know who Nathaniel Jensen is?
Yes. Yes.
So Nathaniel Jensen, well, I guess for anybody who's not aware, Nathaniel Jensen is a creationist who works for Answers in Genesis. He's one of their golden boys.
Yeah.
And he claims that you cannot extract DNA from fossils. Now, apparently, all the DNA we have extracted from fossils over the past like 30 years now just doesn't matter. Now, Svante Pääbo and his team in is it Sweden? Sweden or Switzerland? It's one of those. I forget.
Going off of the first name, it's Sweden.
Okay, Sweden. Yeah. So his team actually does that research, which is called Paleogenomics, and he won the Nobel Prize for that research, which Nathaniel Jensen said cannot happen. So on humans, and so it's so funny how many things he won, like how many the Nobel Prize was awarded like for his work in paleogenomics, which concerned the evolution of humans. So he literally won the Nobel Prize for his work in evolution on humans or of humans.
Oh, so,
which is so funny.
I'm glad you put the name in the side chat, so I'll or in the private
also,
chat.
I'll answer Kyle Pratt's question. Kyle Pratt asks, has the view on hominin evolution changed as the fossil record has become quite crowded? As in, did it appear more punctuated equilibrium, but now seems more gradualistic? Well, as I said earlier, both of these are like endpoints on a spectrum. And as I'm not an anthropologist. Erica would be a good person to ask, but from my understanding, it's I mean, it's both gradualistic and I would say you have this sort of punctuated equilibrium because within 6 million years, we have rather rapid changes, right? You have changes in jaw and facial or in like your jaw and facial prognathism. You have cranial changes. You have changes in like our hip and our knees and wrists and ankles and all this sort of stuff. And that's only within the past 6 million years. Now, that's not we didn't like add any bones or anything, but we changed the relative proportions of a lot of things within 6 million years. And so on the one hand, yeah, it seems, kind of rapid. There's been this period of rapid evolution, but at the same time, you can see the steps that have progressed, right? We can go from Sahelanthropus to like Australopithecus, and then go through a bunch of Australopithecines to early Homo up to today. And you can see how those changes happen. So kind of both, I would say, I guess. But yeah, very good question. All right. We ready to get back to the video?
So I first of all, I wanted to say that I put the links in the chat. I put the name of the guy in chat. And I'm almost, so we can actually show people. Okay. There we go.
There you go. Yeah. I can't really. My screen's small.
Is there a way to make him the... Oh yeah, I forgot. There
you go.
So,
so prize motivation for his discoveries concerning the genomes of extinct hominins and human evolution.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's a screenshot I needed because I tend to bump into young Earth creationists. I'm going to have a lot of fun with this.
Yep. So there you go, Peter. Really? I'm happy that I made you happy.
See? This is why we come here, to hear things like that. I don't catch everything. I catch a lot just because of the people that I follow on Twitter and elsewhere on social media. But yeah, I hadn't heard this. So this is really, really fun.
Glad I could make you happy, Peter. You do a lot for me, so here I am, helping out you too.
This is something that we can
Merry Christmas.
Annoy the bottom feeders with. Okay, now I seem to have a problem, which I had before. Nope, not that. because for some reason, yeah, now it goes away. Okay. Let me refresh the cache because I couldn't get rid of the comment. It would not go away.
Well, it's gone now.
So
there's a new one.
There's the link that's in the side chat, and now see now it's working again. Okay, so after all this sanity, shall we go back to the less sane part of the show?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, let's get to it.
Okay.
Making for a rather annoying thorn in the flesh of the scientific establishment, Eldridge and Gould's theory jokingly came to be referred to as evolution by jerks. So what made the two paleontologists go down such an unorthodox route?
Okay, pause for 1 sec. Okay, in fairness, the Big Bang was also an attack on the view that the universe had an origin and as opposed to the steady state model. So like, okay, people give pejorative names to theories. What do you want? Anyway, that's all I had to say on that. I can't hear you, Peter.
Sorry. The picture that he put up, this just annoys me. The guy with the steam coming out of his ears, that's not the scientists. That's the creationist who's being confronted with yet another fact that is evidence for evolution. That is how they look. It's
right.
And why?
I mean,
why
sure,
the
maybe
child?
There were some.
Why the childish pics? I mean,
I think it appeals to his audience who thinks that like the introduction of new theories makes like the orthodox defenders upset because on the one hand they want science to be like science is like, you know, super objective and everything, and we can trust science, but at the same time the scientists are like super biased and not objective. Like, how can you can't hold both at the same time? It has to be, you know? But yeah, it's now maybe some did, maybe some people were upset by that. Like Richard Dawkins seemed he didn't like it, but many of the paleontologists, I've read paleontologists who were there at the time of Gould and were like, yeah, we agree, punctuated equilibrium really does seem to capture the view of the fossil record. So they were fine with it. Like it's such an erasure of like any nuance at all. It's just nope, everyone got mad when I said this thing and I was right, and they all knew it, and
they say that
clapped, you know?
And they say that every single time there's a controversial thing coming up that proves to be correct. So Mary Schweitzer was the first one to discover soft tissue. According to the creationists, the scientists were extremely mad, were accusing her of the most vile things, which never happened.
Nope.
So
you'll never find like, okay, point out where they in the literature, you know, or something where the scientists were saying this. They can't.
Yeah, they can't
do it. There's no place.
No.
There now what you can say is like maybe some of them, like I think Jack Horner was on her like advisor team or whatever. Now they were like, okay, well, we should be cautious with our results and make sure that we've totally backed everything up with evidence. But that's obviously not getting mad about the results, right?
It's also something that you should do if it's this controversial. You don't want to be standing there looking like a fool when it comes out that you did something wrong and presented it to the scientific community as an entirely new discovery. So they had to rule out things like contamination or maybe mishandling of the fossil. All of that had to be ruled out, and they had to be certain that they had a viable theory that could at least explain why this happened. So it's how you are supposed to do science, I think. I mean, you want to check and double check before you present something, because the peer review is where people are going to try and prove that you're wrong. That's basically what peer review is doing. They want to find faults in your new explanation or your new theory. So,
exactly.
If you want to present something, make sure that they're not going to find anything. I mean,
yeah, exactly right. And to your point, DM Wing points out, if I remember correctly, Jack Horner told her to prove it wasn't soft tissue, and she couldn't. Right. So they went through, as much data as they could to try to demonstrate that it was not soft tissue, and to try to be as absolutely correct about the discovery as possible before unveiling it, which they did. And there are researchers out there who don't do that. And they often get into trouble because they'll run to the media first, even before their paper is published, and say, aha, look at everything we found. Here's all this cool stuff, before it's even been peer reviewed. And actually, there was a guy who did that a couple years ago, Robert De Palma, who found the Tanis site, which is a site. So basically, the day that the meteor which killed the dinosaurs struck, so it impacts the Yucatan Peninsula, and it causes these seismic shock waves to flower out in all directions. And as a result of the impact, now by hitting the Earth, it caused projectiles to fly back up into the atmosphere, the molten rock, which then solidified as it cooled, and then rained back down as glass. Glass was raining down from the sky. Now, the cool thing is, well, for us, 66 million years later, is we found a deposit in North Dakota, the Tanis site, where on the day that the meteor struck, these fish died at this site and got buried with the glass stuck in their gills. And so De Palma, he ran to the newspapers before he'd actually published in a journal this paper. And then later it turned out, actually just recently, it turned out he might have also committed fraud in a different paper he wrote. So, there's that. So don't be like that. Don't run to the press before your results have been peer reviewed. It's not a good idea. Get peer reviewed first. So anyway.
Okay, continue.
Yes, sir. All right, let's go for it.
Gould and Eldridge were perfectly aware that neo-Darwinism predicts the existence of an endless array of intermediate fossils. However, being paleontologists by trade, they were also perfectly aware that this endless array of intermediate forms was conspicuous only in its absence. Many breaks in the fossil record are real, was how they put the problem. Eldridge and Gould also observed...
Okay, so technically, even if punctuated equilibrium is like true in its most extreme form, that means if we still had access to every single fossil, we would still see a perfect unbroken lineage, right? The only reason we don't have a perfect unbroken lineage is not that these organisms didn't exist, is that the fossil record is imperfect. And you have periods either of like no deposition or of erosion, in which case not all of the layers are getting, not all the organisms are getting preserved in fossil layers. That's the reason we don't have these transitions. Not that they didn't exist, that we don't have, not everything that died got preserved. Like less than 1% of things that die get preserved. So yeah, no.
We're already extremely lucky that we have so many fossils, that there is this mechanism that is preserving it for us to be able to investigate it. So thinking that you're going to get every a fossil of every single species that has ever lived on Earth is probably not going to happen.
And it gets more and more difficult for things to be preserved the further back in time we go, right? Because when you're looking for organisms, so like take the Ediacaran, for instance. The only reason we have Ediacaran fossils is these are organisms which are buried in like in what are called Lagerstatt. So like perfectly preserved fossil deposits. And additionally, they have not been exposed and eroded at any time in the past. And they have also not been metamorphized by geologic processes. So these are soft-bodied organisms who, under very rare circumstances, got very well preserved, were not exposed and eroded in the past, and were not metamorphosed by, or metamorphized? I don't know. I'm not a geologist. By geologic processes. So it's by you have to satisfy all of those criteria for us to have their fossils today, which is no surprise then why there are so few of them.
Yes.
You know?
And
so anyway.
But this is just another example of how they think. They think in such a simplistic way that, okay, apparently the fossils were there because of Noah's flood, because obviously that made layers. Yeah, if you're going to think that simplistically, then if the flood happened, we should actually get every single species that has ever lived on Earth. And we should have no gaps in the fossil record. So it doesn't speak for their argument either, because that would make sure that we get everything. It would be somewhere on the planet. And apparently it isn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, like you can't both have like the flood perfectly preserved everything, but also the flood left most things very imperfectly preserved. Like you can't have it both ways. It's got to be one or the other.
My favorite thing actually is that the argument of the kangaroos. The kangaroos hopped back to Australia because there was a land bridge.
Yeah.
And when the water receded further, the land bridge ended up
it was inundated.
But ended up underwater while the water was receding. I haven't figured out how that works.
So the funny thing about that is
if the water's receding, shouldn't the land bridge become bigger and higher? I'm just
yeah, because the water is higher up, and so the water is going back down. So
yes.
The bridge, if it's like up here, if the water's up here, and the water's going down. Oh, I'll go back on screen. The water's going down, so the bridge should go higher and higher.
Yeah, how does it end up underwater if it's?
It just collapsed.
Yeah.
Also, well, two things. First, Icarus in the chat points out another random German word in English, Lagerstätten. I got another one for you. It's called Plattenkalk. So Plattenkalk is a special type of Lagerstätten, which is only these very, very fine like sandstone fossil deposits. So, for instance, the Solnhofen limestone, which is in also in Germany, isn't? Yeah, I believe it's in Germany. The Solnhofen limestone, which is where Archaeopteryx comes from, is actually a Plattenkalk. So it's not only a Lagerstadt, it's a Plattenkalk. Anyway, yeah, Germans are taking over everything. No, the Dutch are taking over everything. They're taking over this channel.
Yeah, so I have to say it because Icarus says another random German word in English, and then you countered that, and I'm sitting here laughing out of Schadenfreude. Sorry.
There's another one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Plattenkalk. Yes.
Okay. Continue.
The thing about the kangaroos was the other thing I wanted to point out. So if you guys haven't seen it, I highly recommend you watch the marsupial mole's tail, not because you'll give me views, which gives me money, but also because I think it's a good video. So the fun thing about marsupials is marsupials absolutely wreck both the global flood and the Garden of Eden narrative. They absolutely wreck it. And the reason is marsupials started out, the common ancestor of marsupials is like either in Asia or North America, and then they migrated downwards into South America, and then they migrated into Antarctica because we have fossils of marsupials in Antarctica, and then they migrated from Antarctica into Australia while all these continents were connected as part of Gondwana.
Well, actually, Jackson, that's not what happened.
Tell me what happened.
While the flood was happening and they were all on Noah's Ark, so all the marsupials became friends, and they decided they wanted to have a piece of land of their own. So they all migrated to Australia, except for the possums, who were the black sheep on Noah's Ark. So they were expelled into Northern America, and that's how that happened.
Well, then the other possums kept going into South America, and then
Yep.
microbiotheres went into Antarctica, yeah, which was apparently like warm and sunny because we found dinosaurs there too. So
Oh, don't forget the tropical plants in the stomachs of mammoths.
right, yeah, except for the fact that they were polar plants.
Yeah, they were eating tropical plants while they were frozen, because that was the
right.
yeah, and it's all that was the firmament, which was a thin layer of ice that came down on
Right.
Earth, and because of the magnetic, I keep forgetting it, because of the Earth being magnetic, it ended up on the
Right.
North and the South Pole because ice is magnetic.
Yes, that's how that works.
Yeah, I'm getting to know these arguments very well.
Oh God, Robert Byers. No, we don't talk about Robert Byers. We're not going to talk about him. He's too crazy even for us. Robert Byers is like
Don't tempt
next level bonkers.
Don't tempt
Do
me.
what?
Don't tempt me.
Ugh.
He wants
So,
if he
anyway.
wants if he wants to have a chat.
No, Peter, don't
No,
do it.
no, he
This is a
can't.
man who said that caves have body plans.
Caves have body plans.
He said caves have body plans.
I mean, have you heard of Mott Fossil University?
Oh God, no, we're not doing this again. We're not doing this again. Back to the video.
Okay.
what they called stasis. With this term, they captured the fact that all species, once they show up in the fossil record, either don't change at all during their geological history or only in ways far too small and insignificant for those changes to explain macroevolution or the origin of new species.
That is
against the
absolutely
backdrop
not
of these
what stasis means. That is just a bald-faced lie. There is literally nowhere in the technical literature he could have pulled that.
I did not do this
Nowhere.
on purpose. I just pressed pause. I did not do this on purpose. I just wanted to. I pressed
believe
pause because I wanted to apologize for the people who are suffering from epilepsy. We are not responsible for the flashing on screen that may cause an harmful attack. So if you have epilepsy, maybe you want to listen only, because
Yeah, we don't like that. It's not good. I don't know why he did that. He didn't do it in his other videos. This is the first one. He just that we watched, I should say. He's probably done it in other videos, but like this is the first one we've watched.
I think he did something similar in the first video, because I think we mentioned that on the very first show. I'm not entirely sure, but I have
maybe we did. Huh.
I have seen more videos of him where the whole flashy thing seems to be a thing.
I remember last time, because we started this video last time and we were all like, "Oh God, why is he doing that?"
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you're right. Maybe we did.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was the only comment I wanted to make. It's just that he's lying. There's nowhere he could cite. There's no citation he could possibly pull for that. So
look at him being surprised.
He's like Ray Comfort right now. This is where the banana goes. No.
Yes.
Sorry.
I didn't want to go there.
observations, Gould, Eldridge, and others who jumped onto the iconoclastic bandwagon of punctuated equilibrium claimed that the explanation for the gaps in the fossil record must stem from evolution happening fast rather than slowly. Due to the speed of the evolutionary process, they argued,
I mean, in part, but not entirely. Also, the fact that speciation often happens when you have smaller populations ending up in different geographic areas. That was also part of it. So yes, speed was part of it, but also the fact that you have smaller populations often when you have like allopatric speciation events. But they didn't deny that gradualism happens. He keeps saying that, and it's just wrong. It is just a lie. And if you would just read their literature, you would know it's a lie or just wrong. let's be real. We all know Deflate doesn't read the scientific literature. We all know he's just copying from somebody else. He does not do his own research. Come on. Anyway. I can't hear you, Peter.
Oh, I keep forgetting to unmute. And we did cover the book, the great book, but that has all the knowledge about creationism. Did man get here by creation or evolution?
Right.
I mean,
right.
He's probably reading the scientific sources that are mentioned in there, the Saturday Evening Post and
right,
the Sunday Gazette and whatever they think is
the World Book Encyclopedia. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe that's what his sources are too. You know.
I mean, if you actually start paying attention to the creationists, they will all at some point just bring up an article in a newspaper or from a news website.
Right.
Yeah. I can't say that I've watched any creationist who hasn't.
Yeah, when you try to go through literature with them, like technical literature, it is like pulling teeth.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've done it on more than one stream. I've done it. It is terrible. It's not fun.
It is. It is. So. Okay, continue.
Yes, sir.
Intermediate forms existed for too short amounts of time and in too small numbers to leave traces in the fossil record. Yeah, they backed up this unorthodox idea of fast-paced evolution primarily with a concept they called allopatric speciation. A second, though less important notion in their argument was what they called...
Okay, allopatric speciation had been around since the start of the neo-Darwinian synthesis. You had like Ernst Mayr writing about it back in the 40s. So no, they didn't invent it. It had been around for a long time by then. What? Okay, anyway.
This guy is getting to you. I mean, you're literally...
It's not as bad as Turek, but yeah.
Yeah, well.
Yeah.
Species selection. Let's look at the two in turn. In order to get the idea of how allopatric speciation works, think of the reindeer population in Greenland. Let's imagine that one specific herd of, let's say, 100 reindeers gets isolated due to an earthquake, leaving a cleft and
You're muted.
I just saw the logo of National Geographic. I'm just saying.
That's where he's getting all his information.
Yeah.
Also, before he goes on, I don't think species selection wasn't part of punctuate equilibrium. I'm curious to see how he defines it. We'll see in a moment, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't think that wasn't originally part of Gould and Eldridge's idea. Maybe you could. I don't know. That's weird. Anyway, we'll get to it. Okay.
Trapping those 100 reindeers in a valley, cutting them off from the rest of the reindeer population. This secluded group is now reproductively isolated, which offers an opportunity for allopatric speciation. I'll explain in a minute why and how this is the case. But first, we have to understand that the larger a population of any given species, such as the reindeer, the less likely it is for a new genetic trait to get established within that population or to become fixed, as experts say. Imagine
okay,
a new...
Pause. Okay, that it depends. That very much depends on what type of mutation we're talking about or genetic variation. Like by drift, no, that's not even technically true. Okay, well, actually, can you show me the screen again? I want to see the quote one more time. I'm sorry. I want to see that. Well, okay, if you could go back
and get rid of this really cute deer. Hold on, I have to pull some strings.
Go back like 10 seconds. I'm sorry, Peter. I had to think about it, and then by the time I thought about it, I was like, I don't know if that's... Yeah, let it play for a second.
Look, I'm not doing this on purpose.
The banana goes right in here.
I have no clue where I am right now, so let's just play and
There's an
see.
opportunity for allopatric speciation. I'll
play
explain in a minute why and how this is the case. But first, we have to understand that the larger a population of any given species, such as the reindeer, the less likely it is for a new genetic trait to get established within that population or to become fixed.
Pause. Okay. I do not know if this is necessarily the case. I don't think it is. Like, just offhand, the larger population is less likely it is for a new. I don't know that that's true. If a trait appears which is adaptively beneficial, it's not going. It can still go to fixation. It might take a bit longer, but that doesn't mean it's less likely to get fixed.
So
I don't understand that. Does he mean maybe that might be true for genetic drift specifically?
So what
did you say, Peter?
So you watched the same channel, and I forgot which channel it was. There was I think it was PBS Eons that posted this week about the frogs in Chernobyl. Did you see that by any chance?
I haven't watched that video yet. No. Are they like radioactive or something?
So they live in this radioactive environment, and there's a fair amount of frogs living in that particular part, right? So what they've now discovered is that melanin doesn't only protect you against sunlight, it also protects you against radiation. So what is happening right there with the frogs, which used to be a very bright green, those frogs are now very dark green to even black, because the melanin is that they have more melanin in order to give them the protection against the radiation. That would be considered a new genetic trait, I think.
Yeah.
The melanin has been present in the frogs anyway, but not in these amounts where the frog goes entirely black. First of all, I didn't know it. I thought it was a really cool thing to learn from.
Yeah, I've heard about the radiotrophic fungi around Chernobyl, but I hadn't heard about the frogs. That is pretty interesting.
Yes, and they had the pictures, and the frog is literally 100% black. One of the frogs that they showed. So
that is pretty cool. I didn't know that.
Should we should we all end in a nuclear war? The people from the KKK are going to be really annoyed. I mean,
they're going to be at a selective disadvantage.
Yes.
So about this
they're going to die out through natural selection, which I think is funny.
Well, I think as Vosh pointed out recently, in a debate he did as he pointed out in a debate he did a while back, like the only reason that such people are around is we can't do anything about them, really. Our society coddles their existence, so they would have probably already been selected out, except that nothing we can do about it. But anyways, so back to this quote. Can you put it up on screen again, please?
I can.
So the larger a population of any given species, the less likely it is for a new genetic trait to get established within that population or to become fixed. Now, becoming established, and becoming fixed are two different things. A trait is established when it occurs, but it is not fixed, obviously. Now, fixed means that either the entire population has it or most of a population has it. That's basically what fixed means. Now, this might be true for genetic drift, but I am very skeptical of that this is applicable to natural selection, because if you have a trait that's adaptively beneficial, then it's going to go to fixation in a population, right? That's what natural selection is. That's why that happens. So I don't know what that means. Or additionally, if you have like a polyploid event or an allopolyploid event where, you know, a lineage like duplicates its set of chromosomes, then and they become reproductively isolated, even if they're in a large population, they've just become a new species. Like that's how polyploidy works. And it has happened in like 80% of all plant species. So I don't even I'm very confused by this statement. I'll say that. I think what he's going for is like, I don't know. It's not based on any data as far as I'm aware. The only thing I can think of he is possibly referring to is genetic drift. I can't. It doesn't make any sense otherwise. Go ahead, Peter.
In all fairness, he is a creationist, so he might be using the language that scientists use in a completely different way. Because I've seen that happen before too.
That's true. What he might be thinking about is like the founder effect, which I bet he's about to bring up.
Well,
so the founder effect is basically when you take a subsample, or you take a sample like a subpopulation. You take that subpopulation, and when you look at the diversity of alleles within it, it's going to be obviously a lot smaller compared to the larger population. And that's just a factor of there are fewer individuals. Can't have it any other way. And so the odds that you're going to have like a representative sample of all the alleles in their correct proportions as the larger population is pretty small. So more likely you're going to have a much more representative sample of some alleles relative to others. And in that case, you can have fixation of certain alleles through genetic drift that you probably wouldn't have had in your larger population. But again, that's genetic drift. That's not natural selection. So I don't know.
And I'd be curious what he means when he says or to become fixed. Because this is the thing that creationists do. If something becomes fixed, 9 times out of 10 they will tell you that it is now losing information. Then
right.
Later on in time, this fixed part of the gene goes back to what it was previously. They will say, "Aha, but it was always there." So first it lost something.
You lose.
Yeah, it lost something, and then it regained that, but it didn't regain it because it wasn't lost in the first place. And if you check some of the creationists, you will find that they will tell you first that it's losing something. There are several examples that will come up. Anyway.
Right.
Continue.
That's just true. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Experts say, imagine a newborn reindeer carrying a new trait that's not been seen before, a mutation that, let's say, allows it to run significantly faster than the average reindeer. You've now got one reindeer with that new trait. However, unless that trait spreads in the population through reproduction, so that it
by
becomes
natural selection,
a fixed part of the...
By natural selection?
Yeah.
It's like, I predicted it. Did I not predict it, Peter?
Yes.
He's like, unless the trait spreads. Why would the trait spread, Deflate?
Yes.
Could it be natural selection? Like what? And if that's the case, then what does it matter what the size of the population is? It's still a selectively beneficial trait. And like, what are you talking about?
How else could it spread? Is it something in the food of that particular one reindeer? Did he find a plant that gave him superpowers? Or how would you explain it other than being natural selection?
Yeah, what are you talking about? Like, what? I don't know. I'm so... Okay, anyway, let's keep going.
Listen, Deflate. This one reindeer can outrun its predators. It's more likely to have offspring, which will also have this particular trait. And if they have this trait, they can run faster and outrun their predators. See a pattern there? That's okay.
That's a population's genetic stock. This trait's potential to serve as a means of evolutionary change is lost. Thus, the fixation of a genetic trait within a population is a prerequisite.
Hold on. Can you go back like, I think I missed what he said. Can you go back like 20 seconds? Or a minute? Like, I think I missed what he said. He made some argument and I just missed it. I only heard like the tail end of it and I was like, hold on a sec, what? I'm sorry. My bad, Peter. I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah, they're right there. That's good.
One reindeer with that new trait. However, unless that trait spreads in the population through reproduction so that it becomes a fixed part of the population's genetic stock, this trait's potential to serve as a means of evolutionary change is lost. Thus, the fixation of a genetic trait...
I get what he's saying. Okay, so no, that's still wrong. First of all, that is still wrong. Just because a trait doesn't spread by natural selection doesn't mean it's lost. This dude has like no background in like genetics at all, apparently, because okay. Actually, you know what, Peter? Just to see how bad this is going to get, I want him to finish this statement, then I want to pause.
Okay.
I want to see how bad this is about to get. Yeah, okay.
In a population is a prerequisite for evolutionary change to take place.
No! No, that's not true! What? What are you talking about? That's so wrong! What? What does that even... No, okay. First of all, he says that the larger a population is, the less likely the trait is going to become fixed. That's not necessarily true. And then he says, if the trait isn't being used like in natural selection, which doesn't necessarily mean it's not part of the evolution of the population, then that means it's not being used for evolutionary change. But that's not necessarily true. A trait can still be part of the evolution of a trait even if it's not being used in natural selection, because there's such a thing as constructive neutral evolution. So you can have neutral mutations compiling atop each other that can still spread through the population through drift, even in large populations. So that can still happen. And no, the trait doesn't have to be fixed already for it to be useful for evolution. The trait goes to fixation because of like natural and sexual selection or genetic drift, depending on the size of the population. So just everything about this is wrong. Every part of his argument is just wrong.
Well,
my goodness.
There's more to come. There's more to come.
Oh my gosh. Peter, why do I do this to myself?
The larger a population is, the less likely it is for any new genetic trait to become fixed. Conversely, the smaller the population...
That is not true. That is not inherently true. Why does he keep saying that? May be true for genetic drift. Now, for drift alone, it is the case that it is less likely for a trait to reach fixation by drift alone. That is not true for natural and sexual selection. That is just not true.
Mm-hmm.
A population is not necessarily not going to evolve by natural selection or sexual selection because it's large. That's just not how that works. My goodness.
And why does he have two slides with the exact same statement right after each other?
That's right. He said the same thing.
Hasn't he listened to Kent Hovind? If you repeat a lie often enough and loud enough, people will believe it. This is what you're doing. You just said that. Right. You don't have to repeat it.
Yeah.
Population is, the easier it is for a new genetic trait to become fixed, as the trait has to get past
drift alone. By drift alone. Why is he not talking about genetic drift? Why is he just saying it's like evolution can't happen unless the population is small? Like, no. Stop it.
He's now not only repeating himself, but he's repeating the repeat in the same screen. It has to become fixed as it has to be passed around. in order to become fixed.
You have to pass it around to get fixed.
Yeah.
Peter. No.
So I
Wait,
now see
the
these
smaller the
reindeer.
population
I
is-
see these reindeer at night, all gathered around the campfire, passing around a new trait. Hey, dude, have you seen this? Let me pass you.
You're right, Peter. This is a redundant statement. It's
Yes.
the smaller it is, the easier it is for the trait to become fixed as it gets passed around. That's what becoming fixed means. That's what that means.
Yes.
It is getting passed around. Why are you saying it's getting passed around as it's getting passed around?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
Well, I mean,
Why are you doing this?
he has to fill the time, I guess.
He's like a teenager writing like a 500-word essay, and he's at like 300 words. That's what's happening. He hasn't reached his word count for his video yet.
Yeah. Did I say that? Yeah, I said that. Can I say that again? Sure, I can say that again. I can say it twice in one slide.
There's like a clip of this weather lady, and I can't remember what it is exactly she says. Maybe someone in the chat can remember, but she's like, "It's raining here as it's raining," or something like that. It's like, yeah, you don't say. You know, things happen as they happen. Yes, that is true. Things do happen as they happen.
Yeah, right here we have light precipitation during the rainfall. Something
Right.
I've heard that.
Yeah, exactly. Oh.
Okay. Let's
Anyway
continue and see if there's something new.
Around among fewer individuals. And
that's wait, hold on. That's the same thing. The small population means there are few individuals. Why would you say that twice?
Look at him gloating.
He said it twice. He said both parts of the statement twice.
Yes.
The smaller population in which the trait gets fixed means that the trait gets passed around when the population is small. Like, yes, my guy, that is correct. That's how that works.
He's so happy. Look. Just look at the screen how happy he is that he got it out. Four times now.
At this point, Peter. I don't know if these are tears of joy or sadness. I don't know.
Despair.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Tears of despair.
Absolute abject despair. Yes.
Okay.
All right, moving on.
that's why in that group of 100 reindeers isolated in a valley, a new trait has a far greater chance of fixation than in the greater reindeer population at large. Based on that, the concept of allopatric speciation essentially holds that new species arise from small subpopulations that have been cut off through earthquakes, landslides, or other events from the big mother population to which they belonged. Given that the fixation of new traits in those small populations is a relatively quick process, evolution can move fast, say Gould and Eldridge, and in big rather than small steps, thus the gap in the fossil record. In addition, the small populations in which allopatric speciation happens offer too few organisms for fossilization, so the argument goes. Let's now turn to species selection, the secondary concept driving punctuated equilibrium. Darwin's theory, as well as neo-Darwinism, hold that fight for survival driving evolutionary change happens as individual organisms compete with each other for resources and the chance to reproduce. Gould and Eldridge were happy to agree that such competition may explain the small or microevolutionary changes within a given species, but they felt that macroevolution is primarily driven not by the competition happening on the level of individual organisms within a species, but by selection at the level of entire species themselves. Thus, species selection says that some species may have properties which cause them to proliferate and speciate into new species or to go extinct. In technical jargon, Gould and
Okay, first of all, he said jargon, which is great, but also, I'm not super familiar with
French.
Jean-Pierre Jargon.
Jean-Pierre Jargon.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to any French viewers I have. I'm sorry. Sorry to see you leave. My bad. Anyways, yeah, we're going to
Sorry.
discuss le jargon dans le jardin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I don't. That's okay. I agree with that statement. Yeah, sure. Some species are going to be like better adapted. Like, sure. I don't think anyone would really disagree with that. The idea of like multi levels of selection is not also, as far as I'm aware, very new. Yeah, you have like, I mean, heck, even you have, Dalton. You're right. French people are not real. You are correct. They're too ridiculous. Um, um, I mean, even yeah, it depends on how you look at how you think about selection. So the thing about like Dawkins gets a lot of crap nowadays from like the extended synthesis crowd because they're like, oh, gene selection is too reductive. Gene centered selection is too reductive, and it's like, if that were the only thing, yeah, if Dawkins were saying only the gene is selected, which I think Dawkins said the gene is the vehicle for selection. He did say that. But at the same time, it's not just a gene. And yes, individual genes get selected. Individual alleles get selected over other alleles, right? You can have a bunch of alleles, and some of them are harmful, some of them are beneficial, some are neutral. So yes, individual alleles, so genes, can get selected. You can also have whole genomes which get selected, and that's you. You are the individual which possesses the whole genome. So it is your genome which gets passed on. You can also have like kin selection, where you have genes which cause you to favor like members of your group over members of an outgroup, and also species selection. So yeah, this idea of like multiple levels of selection is not new. Again, remember Dawkins was writing back in the 70s with like the selfish gene and stuff. So yeah, this isn't new, again, by any means. I don't think, and just the way he phrased like species selection, that's kind of it's almost it's almost what's a way to describe it? I'm trying to think of a word. It's trivial. It's almost a trivial definition because we expect some populations to be better adapted than others, right? They survive and they outcompete other populations. So to say that like that is just species selection is almost trivial. I don't know. That's my opinion on that. I don't know.
Okay.
Anyway, alrighty.
Continue.
Yes, sir.
Eldridge claimed that the unit of selection in macroevolution is not...
Why? Why the air quotes?
I think he's just pointing it out, and I'm fine with it. I'm fine with putting like air quotes around, you know, like terms that we're describing. It's kind of normal. It's fine.
The individual organism, but an entire species. This is why Gould said that I propose as the central proposition of macroevolution that species play the same role that organisms assume in microevolution. Species represent the basic units in theories and mechanisms of macroevolutionary change.
Okay, so he's quoting from The Structure of Evolutionary Theory, which is a review book written in, I think, the early aughts, if I remember correctly. Yeah, that's a review book. So, okay, yeah. I also very, very highly doubt that Deflate has read The Structure of Evolutionary Theory. It's like over 1,000 pages. It is a massive book. It's ridiculous. I hope to read it one day, but it's ludicrously large.
Well, he got to page 703 because that's where the quote came from.
Yeah, I do not believe that he has read any part of that book, but that's just me.
Yeah, you could get the quote somewhere else. You don't have to read the book.
That is probably true. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, anyway.
Change. It's this idea which Gould denoted as species selection. Alongside the notion of allopatric speciation, it played a minor role, however, in how the theory of punctuated equilibrium attempted to explain the lack of transitional fossils. Give yourself
That's not what it was
on the
invented
shoulder.
for or devised. That's not why it was devised. We've discussed this already. That's just a lie. There's no citation you could find anywhere to validate that argument. Not one ever anywhere. It is just a lie.
I'm doing it. I'm giving myself a pat on the shoulder because we're still here. He said that. He just said that. Here. Give yourself a pat on the shoulder. That's what he said. Did you miss it?
There you go. I probably did because I was just so angry.
You were already.
I'm fuming over here.
You were already yelling at the screen.
Yeah. I'm yelling in my head before I open my mouth.
Yeah. He does the exact opposite. I'm not doing this on purpose.
No, I know.
I keep stressing that I just press pause. I cannot pick where I press pause.
Now grasped, at least that's what I'm hoping, the famous or maybe infamous theory of punctuated equilibrium. The question we now turn to is, does this revolutionary hypothesis actually solve the problem of the missing fossils as it purports to? Well, not really,
it doesn't.
And here are three reasons for
it. It literally doesn't. It never purported to. That was not a reason it was ever devised. So stop. God. I'm sorry. This one claim it's so frustrating because it's just pulled out of their butts. They just reached into their butt and pulled out this claim. You can't find it anywhere.
It has a name now. Did you see the meme? It's called proctomancy.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I do remember.
Yeah. Okay. Let's continue.
The first key problem concerns the notion of species selection, which we've just discussed. Remember, species selection explains why some species tend to speciate more than others. Now, for the whole concept of species selection to make sense... Hold on, pause
for a second. Okay. Well, first of all, that is a really interesting that's a very interesting concept, but one he did not mention. He was saying that these species were more adaptable, right? Didn't he say earlier that some species were more adaptable than others? Wasn't that his definition of species selection? Which is fine. That's more or less trivial. That doesn't mean they are more likely to speciate than other species. That's another concept called evolvability. And that's a very interesting field and a very interesting concept, but I don't know. I've read a few papers on evolvability. It's hard for me to grasp because I'll try to distill it. You have to think about, so organisms evolve. The concept of evolvability is that organisms evolve the rate at which they evolve, right? So some organisms are going to be more likely to be selected for their ability to evolve than others. So if you think about what's the Lyme disease, the Borrelia burgdorferi is the bacterium that causes the Lyme disease. So this bacterium, I believe it's bacterium, it undergoes very rapid evolution within hosts, and that's why it's so hard to get rid of Lyme disease, is because once you get it, it starts undergoing very rapid changes. So in that, there are these islands, these genetic islands it has, which undergo very rapid evolutionary change, and that's what's driving its adaptations. And so some organisms are going to adapt faster, some organisms are going to adapt slower, and that is interesting. But again, I don't really think that Gould and Eldridge had, I don't remember from what I've read of them that they ever proposed evolvability as part of their idea. I'm sure it factors in somewhere because it's just part of the standard evolutionary theory. But I think he's just kind of throwing this extra idea in there because, again, he's not a biologist, obviously. He has no background in this subject. And so anyway, Smitty also makes a good point, which I didn't think about. He says, sounds like deflate means whole species evolved together, like the confusion about monkeys still existing despite evolving into people. You're kind of right. I was assuming he meant more along the lines of the species evolves just into a new species, not over very long time scales. but like when it undergoes a speciation event, you have just that species, which sort of anagenetically evolves into a new species. But again, that's also not what Gould and Eldridge ever argued for. They were like, yeah, allopatric speciation necessarily means cladogenesis is happening, not anagenesis. So yeah, he's kind of like throwing a whole bunch of ideas kind of all together, and some of these ideas are mutually contradictory, and he just doesn't realize it, you know, because he doesn't have a background in the field. I don't know. Maybe I'm overanalyzing it, but I just don't think he has like really any grasp at all on what he's talking about. So anyway, all right, moving on.
I'm not doing this on purpose. I'm just saying it again. Not.
Actually have to assume that a pool of different species already exists, upon which the mechanism of species selection can then act. In other words, species selection only makes sense if you already have a pool of various species. But this is exactly the problem.
Wait a minute. Wait, hold on. Wait. No. Are you saying we can't assume there are species already existing? What do you think selection is acting on? What?
I'm more confused. When he said species, he had these icons of completely different animals.
Well, I think he was just showing like a smattering of different, very different species. But it sounds like he's saying now that like species didn't exist until at some point punctuated equilibrium happened, but also you have species selection. I don't get it. I'm so confused. I'm so confused by this argument. I don't. Obviously, we have a species already in existence, probably in an ecosystem with various other species, and selection is operating on all of them because they already exist. Punctuated equilibrium is not like abiogenesis. It's not intended to explain the origin of the first species. I'm so confused.
I have no clue.
Peter, can you?
I have no clue.
Do you understand what he's saying?
No. I don't. The whole thing doesn't make sense to me. The whole part that he just said. I have no clue why he put it in there with what he was talking about. I
also don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. I think.
And why would it be weird that you have an isolated species still surrounded by other species? What is he thinking? So that if one particular group of animals gets isolated, it means there are no other animals anywhere around, and this is an entirely unexplored part of the world where they just happen to wander into. And if that's the case, so he went off with reindeer who feed off of plants, but the plants were there, right? Were there also different species of plants and then other species?
No, they ate rocks for a while. And then plants moved in, and then they got to eat the plants.
This is a great segue. So what you're saying is the rocks were there?
Absolutely. Yes.
Sorry. I thought it was cool.
So I want to propose a hypothesis for this. The thing is, with Deflate, with the first video of Deflate, the one that I did when I was on Vice Rhino's channel, and also the first video we did on here with where he's just talking about the Precambrian organisms.
Mm-hmm.
it's very clear to me that for most of his research, he was just relying on Darwin's doubt. That's it, right? He was just copying Darwin's doubt. That's fine. But for this, he's not copying anybody. So he had to actually put this together like on his own. And because he is so inept at biology, he's like trying his best to understand these concepts. And some of them he kind of gets, and most of them he doesn't. And he's sort of like smashing them all together because he doesn't have a background in this. And so the reason this is so off the wall bonkers compared to what we've discussed before is he's doing this on his own. He's not using a source material. What do you think?
Which would make sense because that is why he's repeating everything. Maybe he's hoping that if he says it often enough, he finally will get it. Is that
maybe?
And
entirely possible.
The problem is, I just can't focus. The problem is, while you are talking, I'm looking on this side. I have OBS, and I'm looking at this.
He wants to give you a little kiss.
I mean,
just a little smooch, little kiss.
I honestly, I would wish that I could get better pauses than just this because this becoming ridiculous. But anyway,
the plants were also reindeer. I don't know, Dalton. I don't know why have was emphasized. I do not know. I don't understand a lot of the creative choices in this video, if I'm being perfectly honest. I don't get it. Anyway, I mean, I can't talk really. My videos are just, pictures where I'm talking. So, whatever. But anyways.
Yeah,
all right.
But
so let him go on.
So okay, let me as the graphics designer and someone who pretends to know something about video, yours are just pictures. First of all, you don't have the flashing screens that will give people an epileptic attack. Second of all,
that's true.
The things are relevant to what you are saying, which is also not happening here. You don't do the weird thing where you have a PowerPoint and you have a sentence come up, but you add in the sound where someone is beating a keyboard. I don't know if you've noticed this.
I've heard it, because
he added in the yes, as if he's frantically typing while that is coming on screen. I mean, it's a funny touch. Granted.
It sounds like professional, like you're watching it as it's coming on screen and your brain's telling you someone is typing this right now as I'm listening to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
PowerPoint is the pinnacle of artistic expression. Amen, Smitty. Amen. All right.
Okay. Let's continue. So I can get rid of this.
20 Cambrian phyla pop up suddenly in the fossil record, and the pool of species from which species selection could have picked those 20 animal forms is exactly what we don't have available in Precambrian strata. Thus, all that species selection does is...
Hold on.
We wrap back around to the Cambrian.
Is it just me, or we were talking about reindeer, right? And he got from...
Well, he was just using it as an example. I think he was just using it as an example, but...
Wouldn't it be slightly irrelevant bringing up something that happened in the Cambrian when you're talking about the evolution of reindeer that got isolated?
Well, what I think he's going for is, he's just using it as an example to say, like, hey, this is how allopatric speciation works. But with the Precambrian... Okay, so with the Precambrian, because of course it always comes back to the Precambrian. Goodness gracious. Allopatric, well, probably, and sympatric speciation also were both happening during the Precambrian. But as we've discussed previously, there were lots of bilaterians in the end Precambrian. Like at the very end of it, there were a bunch of bilaterians, and they underwent a diversification event from the end of the Precambrian into the Cambrian. And that is what
I think
the Cambrian explosion was.
I think Vesta Freya has figured it out.
It does put random emphasis on stuff.
Yeah. The problem is you don't speak gibberish.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at DM Wing.
Yeah.
You are probably correct. Although
Yeah.
this is coming off less as gibberish and more as kid who needs to pad his word count, as Dalton pointed out. That's what this is.
I have to go back to the video when we're done because I'm completely surprised as to why he would tell us to pat ourselves on the shoulder. I need the context in which he said that because he definitely said that.
I don't remember.
He said that. So now pat yourself on the shoulder. Why? Because we're watching your video.
Remember. I missed that.
Yeah, I have to go back. I have to go back to that.
Yeah, I don't remember where I said that, but yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah, okay.
Continue.
I'm not gonna give the whole spiel on the Cambrian again. We've already done that many times over, so yeah, we're just gonna move on.
Yeah, we still have 10 minutes left. We made some ground, so okay. we covered over 6 minutes in an hour and a half.
All right. We did good.
We did.
Let's get a little bit more in there.
Okay.
Highlight the massive problem the Cambrian explosion poses for neo-Darwinism, but it doesn't solve it, not even in the slightest. This brings us to the second problem, which concerns allopatric speciation. It is certainly true that new traits have a higher chance of becoming fixed in smaller populations than they do in bigger ones. But there is an important flip side to that. Traits have to appear before they can become fixed, and the initial emergence of new traits is far less likely in smaller populations than in bigger ones. And
Stop. Oh, what?
He said it again.
Excuse me? Okay. First of all, the first sentence, when he said there's a flip side to this, yeah, the flip side is you're just wrong. You are just factually inaccurate. The second point is, what the frick is he talking about? The initial emergence of new traits is far less likely in smaller populations? Based on what? Mutations are no less likely to occur in a small population versus a large one. What do you mean? The mutation rate of the population is the same because it's the same organisms. It's just a smaller subset of them. Maybe he means like the evolution of new features that require multiple mutations together. In that case, sure, but okay. No one's arguing that, but
this is the fifth time that he's saying this. Only he put it in a different sequence now. So on the previous ones, he started out with that the initial emergence of new traits is far less likely in a smaller population, but new traits have a higher chance of becoming fixed in smaller populations than in bigger ones. So now he flipped those around, and he has an entirely new slide that he can show while frantically slapping his keyboard and still saying the exact same thing that he already said in two other slides, one of which he said it twice.
Yes.
How often is he going to say
now
this?
Now he's saying the emergence, the origin of these traits is less likely. And I don't even know what that means. It's like he thinks the mutation rate is going to be smaller if the population is smaller.
Yes.
And that's just not how, no, that's not how that works. The mutation rate is the same because it's the same organisms.
Mm-hmm.
Their physiology did not change just because they're in a new location.
Yeah, but see, Jackson, if you have less animals, you have less mutations in total.
That is true.
I think that's what he means. I'm not sure.
Well, that's what I was saying. Does he mean if you have to have multiple mutations to build a trait, then it's less likely for that to happen. Well, in that case, yeah, sure, by fiat of the fact that you have, or by just
Maybe this
the
is
by the fact that you have fewer individuals, then yes, but no one's
mm,
arguing otherwise. No one's arguing
maybe,
it's easier.
but maybe this is what he means when he says passing around. Passing around is actually not from one animal to another because it's their offspring.
By virtue
It,
of the fact, sorry, not fiat.
it they have the same new trait coming up at the same time in that smaller population, and then two animals. This is the Ray Comfort thing, you know, the one that Arn mentioned
Maybe
last time with the dog evolving, and you know now you have a
like
male
there's a
dog.
pound of hamburger that
No,
evolves with legs and eyes and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but now you have a male dog who's frantically looking around to find a female dog to marry and have children with. I think this is how he's
Yes.
looking at these traits, because that's the only way, at least, that I can make sense of the whole argument. If it emerges on two separate animals and those two separate animals end up having sex and having offspring, those offspring would have the same trait. I have no clue. I'm completely at a loss, but it looks like that's what he means.
Recombination. Well, as a result of recombination, they could have both of those traits. Yeah. Dalton makes a good point. A pat on the shoulder for not chasing him down with hammers at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is very fair, Dalton. Very fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, Jesus. All right. We don't have much longer to go on this, mercifully.
I think Dalton Jackson is closer to that point than I am, but I mean, I get to look at the silly pauses, at least that relieves some of my stress. You don't.
I'm Googling this guy's IP address as we speak.
Okay.
Anyway, all right.
Let's
Continuing on.
Here is why. The smaller the number of individual organisms, the fewer the opportunities for random mutation to come into action.
See? Told you.
No.
I told you. That's
okay. By virtue of purely by virtue of the fact that you have fewer individuals. Okay.
He is literally looking at that you have. If you have more individual organisms, the chances are that more will develop the exact same random mutation to come into action. Now you have a smaller population, so the chance is less than multiple organisms having the same random mutation to put into action, and therefore it's harder to.
So, yeah.
I could be stupid, but I think that's what he means.
No, I see what you're saying. Right. He's saying, yeah, right. You're less likely to have like rarer mutants cropping up in this population because the population is smaller. Right. No, that's perfectly fair. That still doesn't. You're still developing mutations in this population, but you're not developing rare mutants as often.
No, but right. I think what he means is literally two organisms developing the same random mutation in order to get that into action in the smaller population. I could be wrong, but to me that
I don't think he's saying two individuals are having the same mutation. I think he's just saying that you're having fewer, like if you're like going through the like most of your mutations are neutral, you're with a smaller population, you're less likely to hit something like rare and beneficial as opposed to with a larger population where you have more chances for this to occur. Okay, in that case, sure, fine. But that doesn't mean evolution isn't happening. That doesn't mean variations aren't still happening. And that doesn't mean that like natural selection works better necessarily than with a larger population. There's just so many things that's like, well, no, but maybe, but like it depends. And he's just kind of going like, yeah, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen, this is gonna happen. It's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. That's like, that could be the case for some things, sometimes, maybe, but there's no guarantee for any of this. Okay, anyway.
In the reproductive process, and thus the smaller the number of new traits you can get. Yet new traits are a necessary prerequisite for evolutionary change. Again, fixing a new trait is easier in smaller populations as fewer organisms need to catch the trait. However, getting such a new trait to emerge.
Why does he say catch? Why does he say catch? It's reproduction. It's it's when you have a mutation and then you outcompete your competitors, you reproduce, and your offspring, you produce more offspring who survive to reproductive age with that mutation. It's not like you sneeze and another individual gets that mutation. They're not catching it.
I'm sticking to my explanation. He really thinks that it will only spread through a population if more individuals develop the same mutation. They catch the same mutation. I think that is literally what he means. I can't make sense of
Peter,
it.
if that is in fact the case, then I have been giving him far too much credit, and he is way dumber than I thought he was. Because
I see no other explanation. Why would he say catch?
Now I'm hoping maybe that's English isn't his first language, and that's understandable, but I'm giving him some leeway. But my sincere hope is that he does not mean
I'll be honest. His English is good enough for him not to know what he is saying. He's German. I know for a fact. So in Germany, if you have let's say an American TV series, it is dubbed in German.
Yeah.
Everything in a different language is dubbed in German. So I get it why German people have a harder time learning another language because they've never heard it speak. Because it doesn't happen on television. But his English is pretty good. The fact that he's using the word if other individuals don't catch the same mutation, I'm still sticking with the fact that he thinks.
Now, you could be right. I'm just trying to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's already said so many stupid things. But you could be right. That's entirely possible. It is possible. All right. Anyway. All right. We'll just do like a couple more clips and then we'll.
It would be a new thing for me to see in a creationist that is how they think evolution works, because I've never heard of this.
That would be a new one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see.
The first place is far harder in smaller populations than it is in bigger populations because of the amount of random mutations that can possibly occur. Darwin himself pointed.
And so this is it. How is it harder? If your mutation pops up in a smaller population and it gets passed on to their offspring, how is that in any way, shape, or form harder than if a mutation gets passed on in a larger population? It gets passed on. That particular fact is exactly the same. It's just less likely that it's going to prevail because there's more influence of other individuals who do not have that mutation. So the mutation could die out if it's not beneficial, or at least not directly beneficial.
Right. Exactly. That's the drift. Right. That's exactly genetic drift. Right. So if it's a larger population, then genetic drift could make it so that it just fizzles out. Whatever individuals have it die out and it doesn't get passed on. That's fine. But you're right. He's not saying explicitly that he's referring to genetic drift. And in fact, he's trying to make his argument about selection. So it just doesn't work. This argument that he's trying to formulate just doesn't work.
No. It's a weird argument.
So it is very weird. I think it's because, again, he's like off script. He's not, he didn't follow another creationist in making this argument. He's trying to do it himself. And it's like way weirder because he's trying to do it himself
Mhm.
than otherwise. So,
And we have seen this with creationists before. Angelo. Sorry.
true. Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. Anyway.
Out that this numbers game is key when he said that forms existing in larger numbers will always have a better chance of presenting further favorable variations for natural selection to seize on than will the rarer forms which exist in lesser numbers. Gould recognized this dilemma.
Okay, did I not say that earlier? I
Yes.
said exactly that. I
Yes.
said exactly that. Yes. Or there is a less likely chance for rare variants to appear in a smaller population,
Mhm.
but that does not mean variants are less likely to appear in a
Yes.
smaller population. You still have mutations.
That is exactly what you
Yeah,
said.
no, I already said this. So
Mhm.
like it's this that doesn't help his argument though,
No.
because his argument is dependent on variations period happening. And now he's quoting Darwin as saying rare variants are less likely to happen. Like
But Jackson, honestly, have you never seen a younger creationist slightly move the goalpost?
Peter, this isn't like goalpost shifting. He put it on like a Tesla rocket and has sent it into space, a SpaceX rocket,
Yes.
and now it's on the moon. That's what he's doing right now.
I mean,
Yep.
it's never mind. Let's go to
Anyway.
the oops. I want to hear the oops.
The oops.
Which is why he later adjusted his hypothesis by saying that while new traits may get fixed in short periods of time in smaller populations, the emergence of such traits happens among larger populations over the long periods of stasis.
Wait, pause.
But with this...
Wait. Oh, crap. I was trying to follow that statement, but it was...
Hold on.
First of all, there was no citation. Can we go back to that statement? Because I wanted to look at it again. Because for one, there was no citation. There wasn't.
The emergence of such traits happens among larger populations over the long periods of stasis.
There's no citation for this, first of all. New traits may get fixed in short periods of time in smaller the emergence of such... That's like a comma in the middle of two complete sentences. This isn't a statement. This is two complete sentences. The emergence of such traits happens among over the long... What? That doesn't even make sense. I don't think... Did Gould say that? There's no citation. New traits may get fixed in short periods. Hey, Jamie, are you in there? If you're in there, Jamie, can you look up this quote? Because I don't think this is something Gould said.
Jamie was here earlier.
If they put it on a SpaceX rocket, it would just explode. You're probably right, Dalton. My bad. Yeah, Jamie, if you're still in there, can you look up this quote? Because I don't buy this. I don't buy this quote. This doesn't make any sense. It's either like there should be an ellipsis somewhere in it or something, or it's two sentences rammed together. There's Jamie. Okay.
Jamie's here.
Because this is a very weird quote. Yeah. He didn't put it in quotes. He didn't assign it to Gould. He just said Gould said this, or Gould revised his theory to this. Yeah, I don't buy this. I don't buy this quote.
That could be a thing with the language that he just maybe he forgot. Comma, I'm not entirely sure. I think even in German that would be two separate sentences, but I could be mistaken.
Put a period in there. It's very weird. The emergence of such traits happens among larger populations over the long periods of stasis. But you just... No, hold on. You said earlier that the traits... Yeah, you said the traits are getting fixed in short periods of time, but they're emerging in the long periods of time. So the traits are emerging, but they're neutral for a while, and then the environment changes and they become selectively beneficial? Is that what you're saying? I'm not saying it's not impossible. Like, okay, sure, that happens, yeah. you have neutral variations which can become selected later. Brian Stevens said it's not listed. Yeah. I don't, is that, maybe that's what he mean? Okay, well, okay, if that's the case, like you have a neutral variation that can become selectable, that happens. We talked earlier about like genetic drift and constructive neutral evolution. So sure, you can have variations which arise, and when they first arise, they're neutral, they don't do much of anything. And then later, maybe you have multiple neutral variations together, or the environment changes in such a way that suddenly you have selection on these neutral variations. And that could also be factored into the theory. But okay, cool, I guess. I don't think that was something Gould added later. I'm pretty sure that was something already implicit to the theory, like from the beginning. I don't know. Anyway, all right, continuing on, I guess.
Well, just one thing. Since it is one sentence, when he says new traits, and then it says the emergence of such traits, which is new traits.
Yeah. Right.
Which is also kind of weird. So new traits happen among larger populations over long periods of stasis? No. They happen all the time. Not just in larger populations over a long period of stasis.
It's getting zero. Yeah, he's getting 0 hit. Or sorry, Jamie's getting 0 hits. Yeah. Okay. So this is not a Gould quote. This is just a Deflate quote that he's like attributing to Gould.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Well, actually, I just realized what time it is. Also. All right. So we're closing out on that. So I just want to say I think that's pretty dishonest. That's dishonest.
8.5 minutes to go. 8.5 minutes to go. So
it seems pretty dishonest to me to assign a quote to someone to say Gould said this, and then just say and like to say that and no, it's not a quote. That seems pretty dishonest to me. I don't know.
We've seen it happen. I mean, people like Kent Hovind just copy off of a website. I think Arn caught him on several quotes that don't exist other than on creationist websites. He might have invented a new one. It's possible, I guess.
Yes. There's with regard to that, you're right. What does he say? He says that like Ernst Haeckel got sued by the University of Jena for faking the embryos. That didn't happen. He did not get sued by the university. There's no evidence that ever happened. Kent Hovind made it up, right? If you look up that quote, you will find one Kent Hovind saying it, and you'll find a bunch of people parasitically copying Kent Hovind saying it. You won't find a reference anywhere. The most you'll find is like Haeckel and another guy sued each other over some unrelated stuff, but that's it. Haeckel was never sued by the University of Jena, or however you pronounce it. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. It's Jena. Jena. The University of Jena. There's no evidence he was ever sued by them. I've looked it up because I think he also made
I think he also made the claim that he was fired from that university because of it. That was after the lawsuit.
Yeah,
he was fired and never found work anywhere on a university. I've heard him make that claim too.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Hovind doesn't care about honesty at all.
That is true. That's very true. Yeah.
It's his life's work.
This is the second case of seeming quote misattribution from Deflate. Okay. So yeah. So we're gonna end on that very dishonest tactic. So Peter, what's going on your end?
So tomorrow at 3 p.m. U.S. Central, or 10 p.m. in the Netherlands and in Western Europe. I'm going to be on my co-host Robert Reed's channel, Gin and Truth, and we will continue our conversation about the chat that we had with a presuppositional apologist,
Okay.
who basically all he did was gaslight Robert, and he kept telling him what he believed, and Robert denying it for an hour and a half straight.
Yep, that sounds about right.
And so he did a recap. So he put up the highlights of his conversation with Robert, and we're going to review that as we go along. We did invite him to have that conversation, and he said, well, I'm not going to talk for 6 hours, because this was a show that the part with Robert lasted an hour and a half. I think I was in there for a little over half an hour. I didn't keep track of the time. But so according to him, that was far too long. It would take us 6 hours. And Robert said, well, you can take some bullet points, and I will take some bullet points. Give us the timestamps, and Peter will edit. I would edit a video, so we could go over a fairly short video, which, I mean, we covered almost 10 minutes tonight. So it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to do it, and then went on his channel during the premiere in the side chat and lied to people and said that we had invited him and that his show would take 6 hours. Not knowing that I was in the side chat at that time, so I told him, I was there for your DM conversation with Robert. That is not what happened.
Ruh-roh. That's pretty funny.
We're going to have some fun. So Robert and I, for people who do not know, we're brothers from another mother. We think alike, we act alike, even though he's black and he's from the US and I'm white and from Europe. It's a really weird thing, but I consider Robert a very good friend. After meeting him,
Yeah, Robert's a cool guy. I like him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's some chemistry. We met on, Robert calls her the creature, a certain apologist from who is at the University of Tampa. I think pretty much everyone knows. The professor for Christ, according to her bio on Twitter. That's where we met.
She's like an economist, isn't she?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Professor for Christ, yeah.
Yeah. She's talking about how the miracle of the sun was an actual miracle. It really happened.
Oh boy. You mean by the miracle of the sun, what do you define what you mean?
That was in Portugal, where 14,000 people saw
Fatima?
the sun. Yeah, Fatima.
So funny enough, I kind of want to do a video on that in the near future, because I've done because as you saw, we did the Lourdes video.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the supposed miracles at Lourdes, and I kind of want to do a video talking about other Marian apparitions, or videos talking about other such Marian apparitions. And the Fatima is one of the most famous, if not the most famous, examples of that. So yeah, that'd be really fun to discuss that. So yeah, who knows? Well, maybe.
Yeah.
So
I'm not really a cosmologist, but I'm pretty sure that were the sun to dance in the sky in Portugal, that we could see it in the Netherlands, and not only would be able to see it, but the ramifications across the planet of the sun doing this on a scale that we can actually see it move that far. I think there should have been tsunamis, earthquakes. Maybe we would even be thrown out of our orbit because of certain movements.
And it's funny because that was also during World War One, was when that happened.
Yeah.
And yet there are no accounts of any soldiers in the trenches who also saw the sun moving. Very curious.
No. And keep in mind, that was the first war where they had airplanes and no radar.
Right?
So where did they look for the airplanes? They looked up. Didn't see the sun moving. Because they were busy looking for airplanes, probably. I mean, I'll be looking forward to a video like that.
Yeah, I've thought about doing that, especially with having done the Lord's video now. So yeah, it's a definite maybe. We'll see.
Brian Stevens says, I've seen the sun dance. It was heat being produced by a vent and bending the air around. Yeah. So
yeah,
but that wouldn't be something that 14,000 people. I don't know. I have no explanation. I have never bothered to look it up.
Because it was a miracle, Peter.
Yeah.
You have no explanation, no naturalistic explanation. It's a miracle. Yeah.
What is a miracle that?
Yeah, you're right. The thermal, the sun dogs, that has been one of the hypotheses proposed to explain how they could have maybe thought they saw the sun moving. So yeah. It's something to think about.
It's also a possibility of mass hysteria when people get really excited when something is happening. And I've tested this, so this is a fun thing. I used to go on holiday with a good friend of mine, and at some point, children like we developed the hobby of flying a kite. And we bought more and more kites, not just for the kites, because of the string, so we could get the kite to go higher and higher and higher. And at some point, it just crashed. And we stood there on the campground looking up, talking about the kite that had crashed in half an hour earlier, and we had already retrieved it. And people were coming up. Are you still flying a kite? Yeah. You can't see it. It's right up there. And they saw it. There was no kite. There was a piece of string going up a tree, over a tree, and we still had that tied to one of our mobile homes. So it was fairly in a straight line, and they saw the kite that wasn't there. Well, it's that easy to trick people.
The flea circus. It's like the flea circus, Look at the fleas.
Well, you would actually be able to see those, but yet this kite was no longer there. And at some point we had at least 10 people looking at the kite, telling us that it was moving back and forth. Now it's going back in the clouds, and now it's coming out again. And we thought, this is fun. We're going to keep this up. And then at some point, my girlfriend at the time came out and held up the kite and said, "Did you know it was crashed?" So that spoiled it. But yeah, we're going to have some fun tomorrow.
Well, good. That does sound like fun. I'm sure that'll be very enjoyable. Over here, we are going to put out the Duckbill's Tale. That's the next video in the Ancestors' Tale series. I don't know, probably pretty soon. Then we leave the mammals for good. We leave them behind. No more mammals. We're on to the other amniotes now. So that'll be fun.
Yeah. And for people who have been enjoying this, should we mention that we have a slight hiatus from here on in, because next week you're gonna have a guest.
Oh well, yeah.
And then the week after that, we won't have a show.
Yeah, next week we hope to see we hope to speak with a creationist. So that should be fun. We hope to get Dapper on for that. And then the 19th, I have a work meeting, so I will not be here. We have a work meeting after work instead of before work, and rather than worry about when the meeting ends, I told Peter we'll just go to the next week. So
here in the Netherlands, we've developed a whole new thing: work meetings during work. which is a lot easier.
Well, the managers all have their meetings during work, but this is look, I don't know. I'm not a manager. I don't make rules. I barely follow the rules. So
I'm curious.
All right,
do you still get paid while you are in a meeting and not being able to go home?
yes, yeah,
Okay.
we are on the clock while we're in the meeting.
That's a good thing then.
Yeah. So anyway, alrighty. Well, thank you everybody in the live chat for watching. I appreciate all of you guys for coming and being part of this. And thank you, Peter, for hosting and co-hosting. I really appreciate it.
Anytime.
And we will see you all next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.